This is episode number 105, featuring one of the world's most brilliant pastel artists, Richard Mckinley, who's also an oil painter.
This is the PleinAir podcast with Eric Rhodes, publisher and founder of PleinAir magazine. In the PleinAir podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say PleinAir. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhodes.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome to the PleinAir podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm glad you're here with us today. The podcast is brought to you by Lilidol Art Instruction Videos. If you're looking for holiday gifts for artists, or if you just want to kind of up your skills in painting, there's videos for beginners, videos all the way to pro. You can get short ones, long ones, whatever you want. Lilidol actually invented the art video business, and today you can watch them on your phone, your tablet, your computer, or you can still get the old style DVD. That's okay too. It's a hard name, but they have great videos. Lilidol Art Instruction Videos. You can find them at lilyartvideo.com. That's one L. L-I, well, it's two L's actually, not three L's. L-I-L-I artvideo.com. The interview is also underwritten by Homecoming for PleinAir artists. Homecoming is PleinAir convention in April. It's the one time of year everybody in the PleinAir world gathers together to improve their paintings, see their friends, make new friends, and be a part of the community, and get very specific PleinAir supplies in the expo hall with things you won't find in the stores. And it's also got the world's largest paint out, 4 days in San Francisco, 4 different days, and historic. For instance, imagine being part of a paint out where the photos have all of us together painting the Golden Gate Bridge in Crissy Field in San Francisco. It's going to be wonderful. This year at the PleinAir convention, our theme is Homecoming because I started the magazine PleinAir in San Francisco, and so that's where we're going. So we're going to have a homecoming, right? Everybody's planning on coming in. It's going to be a lot of fun. You don't want to miss this one. It's a homecoming gathering. PleinAir painters, maybe we should do like a homecoming king and queen. That's an interesting concept. I wonder who it would be. Anyway, we hope you'll come. It's really like going home. It's kind of like, it seems like it's a big thing, but you feel very cozy and comfortable because you're around all the people you love. Everybody's welcome. You can, like if you're a new painter, you're welcome. New painters can paint there without feeling self-conscious. It's really a lot of fun. Anyway, we've got incredible faculty, over 80 amazing faculty painters, including Richard Mckinley, plus so many others. And we have this year a pre-convention workshop with the amazing Joseph McGurl and also Joseph Zbukvic. And Joseph Zbukvic is coming in from Australia, one of his few rare appearances in America. And of course, workshops for him are waiting list only and hard to get into for possibly years. And so this is a great opportunity. You can learn more at pleinairconvention.com. Let's get right to the interview with Richard Mckinley. Well, I'm thrilled to have with me today one of the world's great painters, great pastel painter, great oil painter, Richard Mckinley. Welcome to the PleinAir podcast.
Well, thank you, Eric, and it's such an honor to be asked to chat with you about the things that we're passionate about, PleinAir painting and art.
Well, from what I understand, you've been on the road almost continuously. What have you been up to?
Well, I travel a lot teaching art, have for well over 40 years, and feel very fortunate that I get invited to come to a lot of places and just try to share what I've discovered. I think that all of us who do teach figure out that we're really just a big funnel sharing the information that's been imparted to us, and we just keep carrying on that legacy. And then we make it our own, bring our stories and our adventures to it. And so I enjoy doing that a lot, and of course painting, the wild adventure, being somebody who loves landscape, getting to explore new places and find inspiration from that is a real pleasure.
So for the people who might not know, and I can't imagine anybody wouldn't know, but we've got a about 500,000 people listening to this now, and a lot of new people coming on board every day. So for the benefit of those people, how would you articulate the difference between you and perhaps other painters?
Oh my gosh. I think that early on, there's probably very little different about any of us when we first start out painting, because we're focused on the mechanics of paintings and things. So again, we go to all the great resources that we all talk about, all the legendary artists that are still living and those that have passed that we've acquired information from. The longer we paint, though, I think more of our individual personality starts to come through, especially if we let it come through. And in my case, which surprises a lot of people, being actually a little bit more introverted, I prefer the landscape and spending time with it and finding inspiration in the simple things that are out there. So as much as I adore visiting spectacular locations and find that beautiful and inspiring, it's the simple stuff anymore, and trying to impart that to other people. You know, it's always a little awkward describing, I think, oneself as an artist. I've always thought of myself as just kind of a painter struggling like a musician, playing the notes and hoping something communicates to somebody else, and that you make that connection. You know, I think it's why all of us, at the end of the day, if we look at mankind, you know, we form a language to try to communicate. We play music, like I alluded to. We write, and we paint. You know, it's a visual vocabulary of trying to make a connection with another living soul.
I think it's interesting that you used the word struggle, and I think it's an important lesson for anybody who might be listening, and that is that even the best, I mean, you've been painting for 40 years, even the best struggle with it on a pretty regular basis. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think there's so many myths in life, right? I mean, when we're little kids, we think our parents have the answer to everything, and then we become older, a little more senior, and we realize that you're just doing the best you can. And I think that applies in painting a lot. You know, we want to learn the mechanics. The greatest day of our life was when we drew an apple and someone recognized it as an apple. And we think, well, then it's got to get easy. It actually gets harder, because when you're reaching for something, and so many of these fabulous artists, and that really is the fun of the PleinAir convention, is they're all there and you get to tap into that energy and inspiration, is they're reaching for something. And when you're reaching for that something, it's tough. You know, this isn't just telling a story like a talented reporter. The world's full of those in painting land out there, people that acquire a skill set and they do it very, very well, and we all could go and tell the same story. But when you start imprinting something personal on it, it's a dark room that you enter, and navigating your way to the other end becomes a little more confusing. So oddly, my personal belief is that the longer we paint, the harder it becomes. You know, all the old jokes, I love to keep a sense of humor about it. You know, one day you're being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the next day you're an idiot in front of a blank surface. And that's what it feels like.
So, you know, there's some people who might ask the question, well, why do you have to keep moving into that dark room? You know, once you get to a point where you feel like you're fairly accomplished and you're painting like a rock star, why push yourself any further?
I think it's that sense of not being done. You know, whatever that is, whatever, you know, that, again, the author comes back to the written page, or that, well, let me use another analogy. It's like I adore Yo-Yo Ma and his body of work and the passion that he brings to what he's doing. And he recently was talking about playing Bach as many times as he's played Bach. And yet there's still something he's wanting to accomplish out of that. And I'm not sure it's definable. But if you look back over a lot of artists that we admire's life, there will be these shifts and changes, you know, and this body of work morphs into this. You start letting your mood out. what's happening in the world affects us. All of those sensitivities come into play. So it takes art above just being a good product, a good, competent product, which is nice, but there's something more, and you kind of know it when you see it. It's that old joke from the Supreme Court judge defining pornography. He says, well, I know it when I see it, and that's where I feel in a museum, and it is individual. I stand next to somebody in the National Gallery recently, and they just had tears coming down their cheeks, and I thought, well, that's a nice painting, but it didn't move me the same way as the one 2 paintings down did, that I just kept going back to. And I don't know, that's part of that wonderful mystery that just keeps us, like you said, back at the easel, trying again the next day.
What does move you? What if you were standing in front of a painting and tears were coming down your eyes? What would that painting be?
Oh my gosh, I love to again put some humor into. I like moody stuff. I very early on in my career, I had an agent that was marketing some work, and I would do a lot of more stormy, kind of moody skies in these scenes that I was painting. And he kept saying, he was a great marketer. He said, "People want sunshine. You need to paint blue skies." And I thought, well, I like blue skies. They're fine, but there's something in the emotion of that. So I don't know, a little bit of Heathcliff wandering on the moors in Scotland, and work that makes myself personally, when I look at it, I feel a sense of introspection. And often a phrase that I push myself to do is something beautiful in the mundane. I become profoundly moved in other artists' work, either from the simplicity of their application, that hard fought, it's not verbose, it's not a huge book, it's a simple little novelette, and yet it's all there. And subject matter, simple. So those 2 kind of things, a simple pile of stones, or the texture of grasses, or the mood of layers of clouds in a sky going off, without it just being the connection to grandiose subject matter, or bravura in painting. I mean, as lovely as those things can be, sometimes the simplest tonal little moment or splash.
So how do you get yourself into the mood of the scene? You're going out plein air painting, you're setting up your easel, you've got a certain amount of time. How do you start that painting? Is it a process of, here's what I want to say, or do you just kind of follow your muse and just get started and see what happens?
I think that really is dictated by the situation. The discipline that we've all been, of course, admonished from our great mentors, is work all the time, and some days you just don't feel like it. I just don't feel that great passion in things. So sometimes you get out there and you start, and then something comes out of it. Sometimes you see something and the passion's overwhelming, you can't wait to get started. And some days it really is just a mechanical exercise of you're not playing the big grand match. You're just hitting the ball against the wall, so to speak, in tennis, and strengthening yourself that way.
And how important is that? Because we oftentimes don't feel like going out.
Yeah. See, I think that hits a real chord, that the discipline, because people always say, do you paint every day? And you say, well, I think most of us as professional artists were focused and working on art every day. But it's that discipline of getting into motion. Hit the ball, draw, organize your equipment. Sometimes the concept for the painting can be really simple. I just need to focus on proportions today, or I need to pay a little more attention to value. So for me, there'll be a purpose for the project, a concept to it. Other times it really is a profound subject, something that made me feel a certain way. And it's a bit like signing up for exercise class for me personally. I can find every excuse on earth not to do it. A lovely artist friend of mine one day said, watching me plein air paint, she goes, you're like a dog before you rest. She said, you circle and circle and circle, and then you plop down and you begin. I would also say that I think the longer we plein air paint, the more that we can quiet ourselves down, spend more time in contemplation, and quit worrying about completion. That we lose focus of that sensitivity. I know I do. I really suffer with it. It's like, okay, I've got the afternoon, let's go paint. I know where I'm going to go and paint. I'm going to set my easel up here. I'm going to paint this scene. I'm going to do this. And we stay in that kind of busied mindset around the mechanics of painting versus let's go walk up that path again. You know that spot, Richard. Let's see what the light's like today. Let's see what strikes you. And that leads that when I come back, my studio work becomes really different because I lose that connection. You know, if I'm in Tasmania for a while teaching and painting and all inspired, within a week or two after I get home, I lose it. You know, I find it really difficult to paint a winter scene in the summer and a summer scene in the winter. And God bless the artists that can do that, but I lose that. I don't know. I lose the music quits playing, so to speak. You know.
So do you? But let's probe that for just a second because I think it's an
Sure.
important question, and that is that you're out there doing studies. You're out in plein air. You're inspired by whatever it happens to be speaking to you at that moment or the landscape, and yet you probably you're looking at that and you're going, oh man, I want to do a big studio painting of this when I get back. So are you then not doing that because you're not inspired? Will you bring them back, do a big studio painting? What's your your MO?
It's again it's kind of a discipline that evolved. So just absolutely what you said. At times, a lot of studies, sometimes finished work. I notoriously advocate going back to the same spot. So year after year in the spring, I'm in Southern California painting at the same 3 or 4 spots, Central Oregon, places in Northern Washington, and it really even around the world at times. So if I know I'm going back to a spot, I'll often paint, I wouldn't say more seriously, but a little larger, more conceptual, being there. Now, if I have some great sketches and things like you described, and I come back to the studio and time has shifted, months have gone by, I find that if when I'm out there, if I can associate, this sounds like such a corny thing in my sketchbook, I'll say, identify a genre of music to how it felt to paint today. Was today Baroque, or was it symphonic? Was it jazzy? And I'll write those notations down in some doodle sketches even, and color notes, and anything describe other emotions. Was there wind? Were you cold? Was it abnormally warm? And when I go in the studio, which all of us artists talk about our studios like they're our holy sanctuaries, which they are, I find I can start to put myself back into that mood. It's like going into a room that's colder than a warm room. Pretty soon your body adapts because your other senses are being stimulated. So I try to stimulate my senses to get me back in that mood to do a larger, more grandiose piece.
Makes sense. So, I want to go back to something else you talked about. You were talking about the agent and the whole blue sky thing. The idea of people want happy paintings, or people want more blue sky. So every artist gets to a point in their life where they feel. Well, maybe not every artist. Some of us paint because we just love to paint, but some want to take it to the next level, get into a gallery or sell their work. And they get to a point, every artist has faced this, I believe, where it's like, you need some more of those little red barns because they really sell really well. What's your best advice for dealing with that? Is it kind of like make them happy? Is it walk away? Is it do what you love? Where would you go with that?
Again, a fabulous question. I think my advice and what I've noticed about myself, because I'm kind of a rear view mirror guy looking back all the time to see what happened well and what didn't, is I I often find gallery representation, been very fortunate to have long-term representation in areas where I can paint what I like to paint, and I can find a market in that area. You know, I can have a high desert regional gallery, I can have coastal themed gallery, or a Pacific Northwest type of place, to where the subject matter will kind of fit and the mood will kind of fit. And finding those tribal instincts, it's easier at times to decide that we want to be in that gallery, or we want to be in that art market, and it may not be your best fit. You may not be the big stadium singer filling big stadiums. You might be better suited to a quiet little club somewhere that does well for you. So I encourage artists when they talk to me about that, and I attempt to just share my experiences, is I go, you know, find where you feel comfortable and build a relationship out of that. And over time, the gallery will work with you through some of your mood shifts and things. And then also don't be a snob, you know. The sense of, if the gallery says we could do with some smaller pieces or selling really well, or like you said, you know, we do well with structures here and people love these barn paintings that you're bringing in, listen to them. You know, if you want to keep nurturing that market, but never completely give your soul over either, because then you are just a production line. You're just producing a product. And it might sell, and if that's your reward at the end of the day is large sales, that can be done. We can follow trends, and the trends move, and the major gallery spots around the U.S. and even in the world shift, and we can hop on the bandwagon for a while. But then you've got to be adaptable enough to hop on. You become the cover artist. I was sitting in a restaurant having breakfast with some friends the other day, and there were these wonderful cover album of all the 70s hits that I grew up with, and one of the people said, "Who's singing? I know the song." And I said, "It's a cover. You know, we know the song. They're doing a great job. It's a wonderful cover of that song, but they're not the artist. They're not the originator of it." So I think we find our fit. You know, like you said, there is nothing wrong with just loving to paint. Getting outside, what a gift. Opening our eyes to how beautiful this stuff is, and we then appreciate art more. And some artists want to convey great angst in their work, and, you know, modern art can challenge us to think differently. But, you know, ask yourself, you know, everybody that's painting, just say, why am I painting? And don't look for the right answer, and don't worry about what your answer is. Just because I enjoy it, yay, good for you, you know, go paint.
Well, I think there's a culture of, I'm supposed to do this next.
Mm-hmm.
I was coaching some artists when I had this event up in Canada a few weeks ago, and I offered some free coaching on marketing and so on, and 2 or 3 different people sat down with me, and they all said the same thing. They said, well, you know, I want to move to the next level, and I want to sell my work. And I started questioning and saying, you know, why? Why do you want to sell your work? What is it about selling your work that you want? Well, the answer all 3 came up with was, well, I guess I'm supposed to. I said, well, do you need the money? All 3 said, no, I don't need the money. Then why do you want to sell your work? Well, what it came down to was recognition. And so it was, well, how can you get that recognition without having to sell your work? Because, you know, when you move into that zone, which you've done a very good job of, you know, building your career in marketing, now all of a sudden you have a whole different set of problems and challenges that you've got to deal with. And so I think it's really important, as you said, to really clearly understand the why behind why you're doing it.
Right. You know, you make such a beautiful point, because it comes back to a conversation I had years ago with a gallery owner at a PleinAir event that he had sponsored, and I would always go way off by myself and fiercely independent and come back in with my work at the end of the day, and delivered the work and things, and was standing there and finally just said something. You know, I must have said, you know, well, what do you think, or something? And he looked at me and he goes, well, you've got to know these are good. And I said, never assume that I know that. And it started a conversation between he and I about a basic human need that a lot of us never look at, which is validation.
Right.
And how do you receive that artistically? Is it through sales? Then work at targeting it. If that's the thing, when the gallery calls you and you get a message you sold a painting, that you race in and paint with passion then because all of a sudden you got that kick. Or getting into an exhibition, winning an award from one of your peers that you admire, whatever that external validation is, and be okay with it. Again, we're all human.
Well,
so he and I's great joke with each other was, he said, "Well, never assume that I know I'm doing a good job as a gallery owner." So Jim and I, to this day, I'll say, "I'm sending you a pat on the head. You've done a good job."
Well, I think sometimes, first off, a lot of us tend to be very insecure about our work, especially when we're starting out, and maybe that continues forever. I don't know, but you kind of wonder, well, is this validation real? For instance, when your mother tells you your paintings are good, love your mother, but can you really believe it? I think that I found that there came a moment in time when unsolicited comments came in that were positive. That to me was validation, whereas every other time it was like, oh, nice color.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I know he's a friend of yours too. The legendary Albert Handel one time said, many decades ago, he said, "Don't listen to what comes out of their mouth. Look at their eyes, Richard. Look at their eyes. Their eyes never lie. If it can't take their eyes off your painting, you've made a connection."
That's a great observation. So when somebody is kind of starting out and they're trying to get rolling here, how do they find out if they're ready? Let's assume they want to go out there and pursue a career as a professional artist. How do you know when you're ready?
Oh man, these are great questions, but tough ones. My feeling is, and this, I run into this so often in art. I mean, as you can tell from the conversation, so much of it becomes psychology. And my answer to what you just said is almost like being the kindergarten teacher, where you look at all those bright, shiny faces, and there are some that will never give themselves permission to go out on the playground and play. So you have to do that for them. And then others that you need to pull back in by the collar and say, you need to focus on this task a little more. And that's a tough one. That's something that if we take responsibility to just look at ourselves, and say, do I tend to be more that child that just says, I'm never ready, I'm never ready, I'm never ready? Well, then it's good that they hear the stories, which really helped me a lot, where all these legendary artists are every bit as insecure. There's a point where you go, I know how to paint, but is this good? Am I losing it? We don't hear our own voices the same way. We don't see ourselves in a photo the way that others see us. And we don't see our artwork that way. So finding good mentors where there's a degree of sincerity and it's never meant out of insecurity to tear someone down, but to get a reality check. Look at a body of work. Show, if you're that artist and you just don't know, find a few, not just one, but a few artists that you respect and say, would you look at, here's 10 of my paintings and just give me a general observation. And then realize that it's coming from that one person. It's like getting a second opinion medically. Each one of us is going to bring our biases to it. But that's a good starting point, because some people are so ready and they'll never put themselves out. And then other people, you're going, it's nice to play the game, but you're not quite major league yet. You might want to work a little harder on focus on this and that. That's my advice. So,
and I think you have to give permission to be completely honest, because some people, they don't want to hurt your feelings.
Yeah. Well, you bring up another fabulous point. Boy, you're sparking all my old memories now. My greatest mentor was a woman named Margaret Stahlmoyer, who decided in her older years or senior years that she was not going to market herself at all. It was kind of a generation in her thing, but she was just phenomenal. She'd been trained at the Chicago Art Institute, and she took me as a teenager and just molded me without me knowing that. And one of the things that I remember being told, didn't quite understand it at the time, she was talking about critiquing, because I would go each week and show her work, and she'd give me guidance and things to do and projects. And she said, I want you to understand that word critique. She said, when you bring me a painting and you say, critique it, do you really want to critique? And she pointed out that it's okay at times, again, to be vulnerable. It's okay to go into a situation, even with an artist, when you want their opinion, and just say, I've been working really, really hard. I think that I've done better than I've done before. You know, kind of lay the case out so that that person can take that information and say to you, oh, yeah, I see that. I see in what you're doing now. You might want to focus on this or that, versus just that brutal. Because most of the time, when we respond, this is what she taught me. She said, if all of a sudden you're defensive when somebody gives you their opinion, then you didn't want their opinion. She said, because what you wanted was praise and validation. And she said, there's nothing wrong with asking for validation. But she said, when you really want to critique from somebody, you have to be able and in a place to listen to what they're saying, put it in perspective. You don't have to agree with them, but you don't have to argue with them. And that's not always easy to do, but boy, you see it a lot, you know, where somebody will say, tell me what you think of my painting. And if you say something, you know, no, I did it. And you go, all right, you're justifying it, and I'm just giving you my opinion. You know, you can take it or leave it.
You know, I think that kind of harkens another question or perhaps an observation, and that is that what I have found in attending a lot of workshops over the years is that a lot of people who attend workshops, and I'm not being critical of them, certainly everybody needs to do what they need to do, but a lot of people are attending workshops for validation, not for learning. And what happens is they'll go, they'll watch, and then they'll do what they want. They won't practice what they've just learned. And it's as if they're, you know, kind of trying to say, hey, look at me, I can already do this. And they're not, you know, kind of peeling away the armor and allowing themselves to be vulnerable. And I hear this constantly from people who teach workshops, is that, you know, that's the frustrating thing, is that there are always, you know, one or two in every group that just go off and do their own thing and they don't pay any attention. Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, I think that absolutely goes on. And what I work at is not that I label people at a workshop in my own mind, but you kind of figure out why they're there. And then I'm not real judgmental about it. You know, I'll go, this person's really more here because we do paint in isolation, and so this is a chance to be around 18 or 20 other artists and to get feedback. And you come by and you go, they're absolutely not doing anything the way I do it or the way that I had encouraged them, but you find the merit in what they're doing, especially if you're the type of teacher that is very Catholic about art, you know, to where it's all good. You know, you can paint thick or thin, and you can work dark or light, and you bring that to it, then that can be okay. And then there are some that are absolutely there that say, you know, I know what I know how to do. I want to see and try it this way. And I don't adapt to the students, but I try to be useful to both, because you do get it. I do think the surprising part when you talk is that a lot of teachers don't realize that there's that much of a need out there of people really wanting to come at times to maybe prove to others that they can do what they're doing, but sometimes just to get that feedback that everybody said, gee, I like what you're doing. You know, it's nothing like the teacher's work, but that's good.
Well, I don't think there's a right or wrong, and it strikes me that I think part of our job is to be there to serve, and and serve may mean different things to different people, as you've pointed out. I mean, I see that a lot. A lot of people just don't want to paint alone. They want to, or they're looking for a cool thing to do on a vacation, but they're really not as engaged or interested. So I think I think you've changed my perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and the whole thing with workshops too is that if we think about it, it's a bit like galleries. It's a modern invention, and that is so rarely discussed. It's a good invention, but it's a modern invention, just like we've seen technology shift. We're not watching VHS tapes or even CDs and DVDs anymore. Everything's going digital. Workshops, it used to be, I want to learn to paint better. I need mechanical help. You went to an academy, or you found someone and you really apprenticed with them in whatever they were offering. And that was a dedication to a certain school and mindset of art for a long period of time. And then out of that, your personality would develop, and we'll see that lineage. Then it began, here in the United States and in working PleinAir, a lot from people, those academies getting out of the cities, setting up the great art colonies all over the U.S., and again, people coming even for the summer. I went for 3 months to Woodstock and worked with so-and-so. Then it became a week. Now it's becoming, people go, I want a 2-day workshop. Ironically, I think that so represents the U.S. versus a bit what I see when I'm over in China and some of these other places is we're immediate people here. I want it now. I signed up for this workshop. I want to know everything you know in 5 days and move on. And well, it doesn't work like that. But it'd
be nice if it did.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I know. Give me that drive up, because I could line up with, I've got 100 artists in front of me that I would like to just plug in and know everything.
Well, it's interesting you talk about technology because there's some developments that have happened recently that Google's been experimenting with, where they've actually been able to transfer parts of a brain into another brain without physical surgery. So the idea is that they, for instance, know that there's a part of the brain that knows languages or learns languages, and the evidence, it hasn't been perfected, but they've had small successes with mice in this. The evidence is that they can take that part of the brain, and they believe you'll be able, for instance, to know that you want to learn French, then you can take that part of the brain of someone who learned French and import that into your brain. So maybe one day, instead of selling DVDs or videos, we'll just sell a piece of our brain.
Yeah, there you go. Some little chip that we can put in. If they have the part that can teach me to spell better, I've waited a lifetime for it.
Which word do you spell the worst?
Oh, I have this, I don't know, I'm just a horrible speller and read ravenously and write and everything, but this note that my aunt sent my mother, and everybody's long gone, it was so cute, it just said, "Can you decipher this for me?" And my mother said, "Just read it real slow, letter by letter, and sound it out."
Well, you have more important things to do, I guess.
I guess.
So I want to probe a sensitive subject because I hear this a lot, and I've never on the PleinAir podcast discussed this, and so this is a first. There's a lot of discussion that goes on about prints, whether they be G. Clay prints or, signed prints, limited editions, etc. And I know that you have prints on your website. I have heard so many mixed things from so many artists about prints and sometimes about galleries. And some of the things I've heard are, you don't ever want to do prints because it cheapens your image. Galleries don't want it if you have prints. Other galleries say, no, we want to have something so that if we can't sell an original, we can at least sell a lower cost print. You know the controversy. You've heard it all. What are your thoughts on this? Because you're doing it and you're obviously succeeding at it.
Well, actually, I'm not. I don't have prints.
You don't?
I don't. No, I did about 20 years ago when G. Clay, really early on, we go all the way back to the 70s, I had done a couple limited edition lithographs. And then when the whole G. Clay thing was hitting around 2000, I experimented with about 8 or 9 different G. Clays. I never really sold them myself. I had them available at workshops and things, which really does serve, on my perspective, a good point. A lot of times when somebody wants to learn from us and say they can't afford, thousands of dollars for an original paint, it's nice that they can have something that really represents that artist's work for inspiration and permission to paint like them. But I quit doing that by about 2006. I just didn't have any prints available. I watched. It was exciting when it came on. I saw what was happening. A couple of galleries I was with, it was, we do not want you to have prints available. You're competing against yourself and your market. It is, I mean, as you said, it's an extremely tough situation. And I think if artists would look at it of, again, what's your long-term goal? What's your long-term market strategy, and what's your long-term goal? If it's volume in a lot of venues where you can sell those prints at a lower cost point and make it profitable, that can become your niche. If you're really wanting to play in the fine art gallery market, most of them don't want to have prints available because so much of the public has lost their education of what is fine art. Art, to sound really critical, which I don't mean to be maybe sounding as critical as possible, but the U.S. has dropped the ball on a lot of fine art education. And
you think?
So, lots of people have the resources to have beautiful painting. They build beautiful homes, and they'll, have wonderful things, and then they'll fill it with decorative art. And if you don't have the resources, that's great. Our art provides that visual means of enjoyment. I love that picture, and I want to stare at it, and I can look at a copy of a Rembrandt or somebody's painting. But if you can afford it, get an original. There's nothing like it. So,
well,
I try not to.
This is an education issue, though. There are so many people who probably have never set foot into an art gallery. Either they probably know they exist, but they're intimidated by the process, or it just never has crossed their mind to put an original painting. And I've walked into the homes of a couple of people I know who are very, very wealthy, who had prints, nice frames, but prints on their walls of not necessarily even things that would be good, or you might find something that, that would sell in Target. Again, not that they're bad. It's just that you would hope that if they have, a little extra money, they could do beautiful things. The first time I walked into a house that was all original paintings was at the home of Kristen Teese, who was Richard Schmid's agent. And it was filled with paintings done by her husband, by Richard, and by all their friends. And I thought, that's me someday. That's what I want to be, because I could tell such a big difference. But I think we, as I don't like the word industry for what we do, but we as a collaborative group of artists and art lovers and galleries, I think we owe it to ourselves to figure out a way to educate people in a more meaningful fashion.
Yeah, and especially too, as we look at, like you were saying with the digital transition, is that people can find you now easily. So even if you say, well, I have my originals in these 4 galleries or 5 galleries that represent me, and then I, sell prints off my website, people now stand, even if they see you work in a gallery, they'll Google you standing right there, for 2 things: see what's available and see what the cost point is. Yeah. Artists that are charging one thing here and a different thing over here. And that's another tough thing for the large art community out there. The economy here is not as strong as it is over here, so I need to charge more here than there. And I go, but that's not the world we're in now. We're in this Amazon Prime type of world, and you've got to at least be close and look at that's what people are doing. They know you. You get a lovely message. Like, I don't personally sell originals. That was a decision I made 30 years ago in forming what I call with galleries a marriage versus just dating. And I said, you've got to trust me to know that I'm not going to sell to collectors behind your back. So even if I have the painting and you haven't seen it yet, if a collector contacts me, I'll filter it through a gallery. That has worked well for me long term. That sometimes means that I don't get the sales that other artists do, and so many artists are desperate to sell. But we have to look at how we almost put ourselves in this situation, right? We've also always heard, I've heard collectors say, well, contact the artist, you'll get a discount because they don't have to pay the gallery commission then. And you're over and you're going, well, the more we do that,
it's suicide.
The more we hurt the galleries go away. Can you find a way of working, whether it's with prints or discounts or what your price point that you're selling for? You've got to look at the big picture and not just the moment. Do you want to be here 10 years from now?
Well, there's the short-term thinking versus long-term thinking, and it's a natural survival instinct of, gee, somebody's willing to pay me and I don't have to pay the gallery. But and there's this giant argument about, do galleries do any good or not? And I happen to think they do a wonderful job, because what we don't see is what's going on behind the scenes. They're spending a ton of money on rent. They're spending money on advertising, trying to bring people in. They're talking to their collector base that they've built over 20 or 30 years in some cases, and they're building a market for an individual artist. And then that artist goes out and betrays them, sells a painting behind their back. They always find out,
right?
And it just isn't very productive in the long term, I think.
Yeah, and that's where I want to really compliment you, and which I should have done earlier.
Yes, you should have.
I think you've done a wonderful service, in watching what you've done with your art publications and your career in helping artists to just understand the business side. Because most of them really just say, I just want to paint, and they innocently and naively sometimes don't understand the art of promotion, and to the degree that you want. Do you want the pressure of being that person up there that's doing that or not? And if you use the kind of old Hollywood model, which ties back to your galleries, if I was signed with Universal Pictures, they were building my career. And they might loan me out for a few things, but it was a marriage of I'll do well, you do well, until we don't do well, and then you move on. And it's a different world. I'm getting old, Eric. There's that point where I go, at a certain point, all right, I'm going to have to step off this merry-go-round, because things are just changing so much.
I always correct people and say, you're not getting old, you're just aging.
Yes, and rapidly.
Well, it's a huge dilemma, and it's difficult. I think the hardest thing for people to understand in that environment is to see things from a different perspective. There's the old story about twin boys who climb down a chimney, and then they come out the other end, and one boy looks at the other child, and his face is covered with dirt, and the other boy looks at the other child, and his face is completely clean. And they're not seeing themselves; they're only seeing the others, and that's the perspective that we need to try and have. Because, as artists, many of us struggle. Many of us don't have any money. We're trying to figure out how to make a living. We're making ends meet. We're working other jobs. We're dealing with families, and yet we don't know the world of the people who will walk into a gallery and say, I want that, and not even ask the price. And so if we can understand a little bit more about what their world is like and how to tap into those worlds, it can make a world of difference for any artist. I mean, you and I both know artists who are selling their works for in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And there aren't very many of them, but there are people who at auction are competing to get their paintings. Howard Turpinning would be a great example. And yet, how do you get there? How do you build that up to that point? And I think that you're certainly, after 45 years of painting, you're certainly right up there. I don't know if you're getting that kind of money or not, but it's a process, and it's about time, it's about consistency, it's about the moves that you make. Can you address a little about career building?
Yeah, well, to finish your point, no, I'm not getting that kind of money. I need to work with you more.
Read my book.
I have. But, I think, God, I hate to be this broken record. I think so much of career building are the talking points that you're bringing up and we're discussing, and the function of educating oneself as an artist. If somebody came to me, I would say, educate yourself about all the options. Realize that this is here and now. This is the point that the game's at. It's always a moving ball in front of us. Look at the artist you really admire. Learn from it, but then ask yourself, is that me? And that at the end of the day is what makes it work. Some of the, and it's visibility. Nobody's gonna find you. That's the old cliche in art is, I don't care how beautiful your artwork, if you're not finding a venue to make yourself visible. How do you get published? Having, written, for 20 years and publishing the books and doing the weekly blog posts and columns that I did for all that time, which I've not done recently, it was visibility. People say, how did you get published? And I said, they found me. Well, how did they find you? Through exhibitions. They're looking at the major shows. They're paying attention to the artists that cyclically keep popping up. And you start recognizing the personality of that artist. And then you put a name to it, and then you meet that artist. I said, go out of your way to show up at these exhibitions. And you may not know anybody at that point, and they don't know you. Go up and introduce yourself politely to the artist you really admire. Hi, I'm so-and-so. God, I've loved your work for years. And I said, and then they talk to you. And that can be done through the galleries. My way of getting galleries is maybe not the standard way. We used to send the whole portfolios and things, but I would visit the area and look and observe. And I'd go, boy, I like this gallery. I'm comfortable in this gallery. I could see my work hanging here. I could fit in. Now, for Richard, I don't want to be at the top trying to compete at the top. I'd go, I could be right in the middle here. I wouldn't be the worst artist that I think's here. I wouldn't be the best. It's nice to be that middle child. And then the conversation starts. The person say, I've seen you in here before. You paint, don't you? Mm-hmm. I've been here painting. Well, what have you painted this time? Well, let me show you a couple pieces. And over time and again, that would lead to, well, let's bring a couple paintings in. I think oddly, patience.
I think, Richard, that's a really important point. It's not something that gets discussed enough. Patience is so critical. The tendency is to grab your portfolio, go into a gallery and say, hey, can I sit down and talk to you about my work and show you? And it typically results in immediate rejection. And, we have this whole process that we teach artists to go through. And nobody wants to go through the process. Everybody wants that instant gratification because we're Americans, as you say. But it's the process where you get them to invite you in,
right.
Because when you're invited in, it's more powerful and it sticks longer. It's once in a while you can push yourself in, but typically it doesn't work nearly as effectively. And there's also this misperception that I think we're all kind of falling prey to, that because we're putting something out on social media, Instagram or Facebook, that everybody in the world is seeing what we're doing, and we get this false sense of security that everybody's seeing it, when in fact, everybody's not seeing it. Some people are seeing it. Maybe not even everybody on your friend list are seeing it. It's only 2% are seeing it, but we fall into, we've been lured into this false sense of security from that.
Yeah. I last year served on a little panel down in Southern California for a local gallery down there in an area where I teach, and they had brought in interior decorator, an architect, a gallery representative, and they had me sitting on the panel as kind of an artist. And we were basically talking to the artists in the community. They'd done an open forum that evening, and it was so interesting how the artists were naive about how that industry found art. Here's people in LA again, building beautiful homes and decorating them, and clients just saying, Philip, you know me. That was the thing that the artists heard, was that those people, like a really good gallery owner is the same way. They know their clientele.
Right.
Now, how do they know you as an artist? And that was the key. And they kept saying, publish your work whenever you can. Budget to advertise yourself in the right art magazines. Because they said, we find artists through exhibitions, galleries, and publications. And if we keep going, God, I like this artist's work, I've never heard of them. They said, then we'll go to their website, or we'll track down the galleries that have them and stuff. And she said, sometimes it takes a few years, but we keep this Rolodex. And then we put them with the right clients. Visibility. We're back to, how do you make yourself visible? They're not looking through Facebook and discovering artists.
Well, and Scott Jones, who now works for us, who formerly with Legacy Gallery, was saying on stage a couple of weeks ago at the FACE convention. He said that, I'm a gallerist. I'm always looking for the next great artist. I'm looking for somebody who's going to have a 20 or 30 or 40 year run so that I can sell work from them for many, many years. He said, but I'll discover an artist through, maybe they'll run an ad in Fine Art Connoisseur, or they'll have an article or something. I'll discover them, and then they disappear. And he said, and what I do is I watch the ones who are consistently there over and over and over again. I watch their work develop. I watch their career develop. And then over time, he said, it may be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and then all of a sudden I've got a slot that I need to fill because I have to replace an artist who passed on or something. And I know I've been watching this artist for a long time, but the tendency is to think, again, instant gratification. I run it one time, the world's going to call, and that just doesn't happen. It's got to be continually beating that drum, continually putting yourself out there in every possible way.
Yeah, as the legendary old artist, the tonalist Burge Harrison said, tenacity, young man, tenacity. I tell you, and I mean, you just said the words that everybody needs to hear out there. But what's hard with that, Eric, is that people don't know that people have noticed, and that's what I think gets them discouraged, because they want to know. Did somebody see my article? Did someone see that I was in the show? And I go, just be patient. Yeah. Just keep playing the game. Just one foot in front of the other, and keep doing what you love passionately. The quality will come through, and quality always ends up being recognized.
It's like the rock star who is an overnight success, and nobody understands that they played small clubs for 20 years to get there.
Yeah. Boy, isn't that the truth? They're like, oh, I just noticed you really hit the scene, and you're going, oh gosh, no.
Well, and by the way, not to discourage people, because there are ways that you can speed up the process, but time is the best thing that anybody's got going for them if they can give it time. Now, if somebody is, they're starting out at 65 or 70, then they may have less time, but there are some things they can do to ramp that up. So. Anyway, I didn't mean to take this down the road of a giant marketing discussion, but I think it's something that we all face.
That's so true. Again, that service that to complement you and your organization, I think that's provided a huge kick in the butt for the art community, because it was far more mysterious before, and you've become the coach getting artists to understand that.
Well, thank you, I guess. And what I mean by that is it's sometimes it feels like a big responsibility, and I want to make sure I don't mislead anybody. I think that so many people have this belief that marketing is something evil. Mm-hmm. In the sense that because the marketing that's visible oftentimes is evil, and the marketing that doesn't feel like it's penetrating you is actually slowly, steadily doing a job on you, just because it's there and it's consistent. Mm-hmm.
Well, and this on your end, it's what we've been talking about. If at the end of the day, if the product's bad, you can market it for a short time, but everybody's going to return that widget because it broke and it wasn't good, and they'd go away and they come back out with some other widget. And if it's sincerely, and you keep polishing that product, working towards something of quality and stability, and also branding, not that hear the cart before the horse with artists again. Well, I want to be that. And I go, you've got to give yourself time to develop. You don't buy a style. You don't go into an art store. You don't take a workshop. You start finding the things you like, just like we like certain tastes, certain types of music, certain things, and you start going, I think this is more me. The more you let that out, and it's consistent, and it stays consistent, that's when it gets recognized.
Yep.
Because that's how you and I can flip through a magazine, and you just go, David LaFell, Richard Schmidt, you know the work before you look at the signature. And that's because they have a style and a personality that they bring to whatever subject matter they're painting. And that's branding, and that's a big part of marketing too. You can market somebody that's got a brand, and if they're all over the place, it's going to be an awkward market.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Richard, I think that you and I could probably carry on for 3 or 4 days at this rate.
I'm having a ball. Yeah, so I agree with you, but I know that time is a concern.
Well, we are kind of out of it, and we'll have to do this again sometime and take it on. You're fascinating. You've got a lot of really wonderful viewpoints, and I think, there's something about 40, 45 years of experience that really makes a difference. So you're filled with vast amounts of knowledge.
Well, I appreciate that. I wouldn't give myself that much credit. It's just a lot of experience and being observant, which artists really are, if they stop and think about it. And to a fault, Richard's got an opinion on everything, as I told you, and happy to talk about it. So I look forward to the chance of, one, getting to see you at the PleinAir convention coming up here in a few months, but also to following up on our chat sometime in the future. That would be lovely.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely do that. We're going to have a lot of fun in San Francisco. I want to ask you a couple last questions.
Sure.
What do you think was the most challenging part of your career to date when it was so difficult that you actually thought about quitting?
Ooh, see that you hit me with the dilemma of, do I get really personal or just hit a talking point? I'm gonna take a chance.
I think you got to get personal.
I'm gonna say, and it was very early for me, but it had to do with personal naivety and not realizing that many, many times out there, this sounds cruel, they can be a phenomenal artist but not the greatest human being. And I think that I myself was so raw and so open to these heroes and stuff. And then sometimes you get burned. Artists, it's a tough business out there. And realizing that the old cliche that not everybody's really a friend, and that's okay. And that was hard. That was hard to think, well, this person's my friend, and then you find out, that we're all kind of vying for the same little piece of the pie, which is the world that we're in. And that was my own personal naivety, and it was devastating. I went, I don't want to paint I don't want to lose friends because I happened to get first place and they didn't. And as I've counseled, what I would say to you is some of the people I've really mentored, I said to them once, I said, are you at a point now to where you feel bad telling people that you sold a painting or that you won an award? And the artist often will say, how did you know? And I said, because you go from being part of this little posse that you find, whether it's your little local art group or the little event that you go to, and everybody's cheering for everyone else. And then all of a sudden things start happening for you and not for them. And I said, and you didn't do anything to them, but it's human nature to say, well, why them? So I go, the curve is this. Oh, I love you. You're my favorite artist. I hope you win. And they cheer. The next year it is, oh, well, good for you. You won again. Then it becomes, well, of course you won. And then it becomes, well, I don't know why you always win. And facing just as a human in life, that aspect of it when I was really young and didn't have a little stronger protective shell, it was hard because I went, I haven't changed. I really like you still, and why am I feeling bad that I got in the show? I shouldn't feel bad about it. So my dearest friends now, we have a pact that when we enter a show or something happens, nobody is afraid to say, I got in the show. And we celebrate for one day. And if you didn't get in the show, you mourn for one day. And then you just get back into the game and you move on and you don't take it personal. So that was the hardest thing for me in art, is that I just wanted to be, kind of part of the pack and everything. And sometimes over the years that began to change, and I had to grow up and confront that we're all human and not to take it personal when you start to get that, well, I don't know who you think you are, because sincerely, I don't think I'm anybody. I think every artist that I've ever met that I really admire has the impostor syndrome to a painful degree. What again do we really know? We don't. We're just smearing some pigment around and hoping to make some connection.
And we've got everybody fooled.
Yeah. Yeah.
So last question, and then we'll roll. So the last question has to do with all these brand new people who are discovering plein air painting. A lot of people who have some time on their hands now, a lot of others who just think, this is something I've always wanted to do. I have people who will tell me, I don't want to come to the plein air convention because I'm afraid that, I don't paint well, or I haven't really painted much at all, and I don't want to be embarrassed. What do you think is the best way to approach painting as a newbie in terms of what your process should be to learn and how you should be looking at your work?
Well, I think it's find the courage to join the pack and to not be afraid of making the mistakes, to come into it, especially when you're brand new with it, with not that you shouldn't have goals and aspirations, but enjoy the moment, enjoy the little breakthroughs. Use a rear view mirror and say, is this better today than it was the day before? What did I learn from this experience today? And quit focusing so much on the end result, that thing that you might pop in a frame or not. And then you really start enjoying the game and the passion for the game, and it's not just that end result. And then, like I've said about your plein air convention, it's just infectious to be around, all those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that are sharing this similar journey. And you make new friends, and you just don't feel alone, because as much as you might be surrounded artistically with people who love you, if they don't paint, they don't get it. And whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, it's this weird little tribe, and we know the language, and you get around these other people, and all of a sudden there's this wonderful shorthand, and you know that others understand you. So I encourage people to find that tribe. You need your tribe no matter where you're at in the process, and then just enjoy what you're doing. Find the joy in what you're doing.
Well, Richard, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you again for being on the Plein Air podcast.
Well, and thank you, Eric. And again, thank you and your team for all you're doing for all of us. And I look forward to seeing you at the convention.
I'll be there.
All right. I know you will.
God willing.
All right. All right.
Well, thanks again to Richard Mckinley. I learned a lot about pastel painting and painting in general, so what a great interview. Thank you, Richard. A good guy. We're going to do Marketing Minute. Just a second.
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhodes, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art, Proven Techniques to Turn Your Passion into Profit.
Well, in the Marketing Minute, I try to answer your marketing questions, which you can email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. And if you sent one, it didn't get through, there's a reason. We had a problem, so send it again. Here's one from Lisa C., and I'm not sure where Lisa is from, but it says, Eric, I love listening to your podcast, and your book is something I dig into every day. It's full of great practical information. Thank you for that, Lisa. As a pastel artist, I strive not only to produce the best work possible, but to educate current and potential collectors about this fabulous medium. But, there's always a but, right? But pastels are still taboo for most galleries. My work is selling, and for that I'm grateful, but I am wondering if I'm spinning my wheels and thinking that I can really make more money with this medium. I make it a goal to always talk about what pastels are when a prospective buyer enters my show booth, and I was flattered to have been the first pastelist in the collection of a recent avid collector. I really don't want to migrate to oils because I'm so passionate about pastels, but I do want to make a living at it as well. I know it's hard to give advice, but I would appreciate hearing your thoughts on this subject. Lisa, well, first off, do what you love. Paint what you love. Follow the medium you love. If you switch to oils and you're not into oils, then you're making a career doing something you don't love. You might as well get a job driving a bus, and you wouldn't love that either probably, except I don't want to offend bus drivers who might be doing that, but you need to be focusing on what you love. That answers the question first and foremost. Secondly, if you look at Richard Mckinley, I mean, this is a guy who's made tremendous success selling pastels through galleries. And so I would suggest maybe a phone call to Richard and say, hey, Richard, how did you do it? And Richard probably faced these issues too. But I think it's an education issue, right? You need to educate people about pastels, whether it's galleries, whether it's collectors or otherwise. When you're in your own show, your own environment, you have the opportunity to be able to educate. When you have your life in the hands of somebody else who's selling your work and they don't necessarily believe in pastels, well, you might have a problem there. So I always talk about mindset, right? So the mindset of the gallery has to do with pricing, has to do with everything. So if the gallery that's representing you isn't into pastels and they're going to push oils first, then you need to work on educating them and helping them understand what's happened with the pastels and how popular they are and how many galleries are selling them. And if they can't get it, then maybe you need to find somebody who can get it, because there are a lot of people out there who do it. There's plenty of pastels selling very, very well and selling at great prices. And if you look historically, there's great pastels in museums. There's no reason to think pastel is an inferior medium at any stretch. I mean, look at Albert Handel. I mean, he does oils and pastels like Richard does, but Albert has made a great living as a pastelist. And so I think those days of those old ideas are gone, and though there may be some people clinging to them, I think you can help them through it. I hope that helps, Lisa. All right. Now, the next question comes from Cindy in Sedona. Well, that's cute. Anyway, she says, I want to know the names of the buyers when my gallery sells a painting, but they won't give them to me. What should I do? Well, whenever something like that happens, you want to put yourself in their shoes and you want to ask yourself, why are they being so obstinate? Well, there's probably a reason. For instance, if you were to ask, they'd probably say, well, I had somebody who I gave the names to, and then they contacted the collectors directly, and they sold them directly, and I didn't get the commission, and I fired the artist. That's probably what it sounds like. So they're a little bit concerned about you stealing from them. So I think the first thing you do is deal with these things up front when you sign on with a gallery, because you need a contract anyway. You need an agreement that states things like you're going to get your paintings back, they're on consignment, and if they go bankrupt, you have the right to pull them out of the gallery, which you're going to need for a judge in the event somebody goes bankrupt. So you might as well put in some other things like this in it and deal with it up front. And they may or may not do it. The other thing is, if you're not dealing with it up front, you can have a little agreement that you can put together that just says, I promise if I hear direct from people who have been in the gallery or have bought paintings from the gallery, I will not sell direct. Secondly, I think it's important to show the gallery why it's important for you. First off, people buy from people they know and they like. And if you can develop a relationship, let them see your newsletters, hear the stories of your adventures, see other paintings, and then you can also say in your newsletter, you know, here are the galleries that represent me, or maybe it's just that one gallery, then you're doing a good thing. And so you want to get newsletters and things like that in their hands because it's going to help sell more stuff. And again, they have to feel confident you're not going to betray them. Third, I think you need a backup. Lots of galleries have gone out of business, and you're never going to get the names after they go out of business. And so I think it's a good idea to say, I want the names, and as long as they can trust you, it shouldn't be a problem. But you also want the buyers to feel like you care about them, to help get connected to you. My gallery sends me the name and address of buyers and asks me to send them a nice note. Now, they don't send me the email and phone number, which is okay with me. And you can do something more than a note. You can send them a gift, a box of the note cards with their painting on it. And on the back, it can say from the collection of, and put their name on it. And then you can put your name on it and the name and title of the painting and your website, which means they're writing notes to their friends promoting you, which isn't a bad thing either. So, and you could even say your website, or you could say available from XYZ Gallery. You know, that might make the gallery happier. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. And if you have questions, email me, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Today's podcast was sponsored by Lilidol Art Instruction Video. Tough name, great videos. Lilidol. Visit them at Lili, L-I-L-I, artvideo.com. Also by the PleinAir Convention Homecoming, April 2019 in San Francisco. Visit PleinAirConvention.com. I also do this thing on Sunday morning called Sunday Coffee. It's just my thoughts on life, art, and other things. Check it out, coffeewitheric.com. Well, this is always fun. We'll do it again sometime, like next week. We'll see you then.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhodes. You can help spread the word about plein air painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 plein air painting tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.